Okay. I'm seeing clickbait titles about how they're nerfing aim assist in Modern Warfare 2. And how, like, oh, controllers need it, controllers don't need it, whatever. And I believe they're all in reference to this article, right? So what it says, in terms of multiplayer, the next generation consoles and PC are going to have an advantage based on resolution and draw distance. So it's not going to be an advantage. It's going to be fidelity change, right? The last thing we want to see is a scenario. Let me back up. When we did the last game, one of our biggest concerns at the time was players on mouse and keyboard versus players using controllers. Finding the balance on that. It's an interesting thing because I wish it was a linear spectrum. You can see that a very highly skilled player on a mouse and keyboard is fantastic compared to controller. Everybody else on a mouse and keyboard seems to be at a disadvantage statistically is what we see. So the problem here is not that controllers are stronger than mouse and keyboard, right? That's not the significant part. The significant part is that the high end of keyboard and mouse is much higher than the high end of controller, not much higher, but it's higher than the high end of controller, but the average is worse than controller. So how do they balance the two to where when you play against a really good keyboard and mouse player, you don't get blown out of the water, but for a keyboard and mouse player, the average keyboard and mouse player, they're not at a disadvantage playing against a controller, which, by the way, a top-tier keyboard and mouse player against a top-tier controller player is at a disadvantage. The problem is that barely any controller players are actually any good, and it's not going to put them against the keyboard and mouse players to actually shut them down. But inherently, controller has an insane advantage because controller does not have to have a good pre-aim. Controller does not have to identify how the person has engaged and adjust their aim because the aim assist will do it for them when they engage. I also did play a little bit with controller in Cold War. You actually can push with a controller things that you cannot push with a keyboard and mouse because as long as the crosshair with the rotational passes your opponent, it'll kind of latch to them a bit and it'll just let you you can just pre-fire it and you don't actually have to recognize where they are and it'll just kind of kill them whenever it crosses them. So you actually can push situations that you couldn't with a mouse and keyboard with a controller as well using the aim assist. But the point is, right, highly skilled mouse and keyboard players here make it so that they can't balance the aim assist around average players, which tells me that they're going to try and target what lets high-skilled mouse and keyboard players run the game. And generally, that's going to come down to the movement. COD is a keyboard and mouse game. People like to say it's a controller game, but that's because they don't know how to fucking play the game. COD has been a keyboard and mouse game from the beginning. You need to snap to the angle you want to move in to keep your movement good. If you want to, say, get back to cover, right? You take a gunfight, you need to sprint back to cover. You have to turn around and snap 180 in order to actually do that. That is something you can do on a keyboard and mouse, especially when you start getting into strafe jumps. Hitting strafe angles because, again, sure, because of the way the strafe jumps work, if maybe in Quake, if you had analog input, you could accelerate in any direction you wanted to with a controller and keep your strafe jump good. But in COD, because of the sprint, your strafe angles are really specific. So you actually have to snap to your strafe angle because you have to do a WA or a WD beat. You can't do some weird single key strafe. I mean, it's not weird, it's just a single key strafe. You can't do a single key strafe because you have to sprint. So you have to hold W. So you have to WA or WD strafe. You can't do an A or a D strafe with the strafe jump, right? So to me, this sounds like they're going to nerf the movement and they're going to try and contain the high-level keyboard and mouse player, and then maybe tone down the aim assist to give the keyboard and mouse players a fair chance. Or they just add bullet magnetism to keyboard and mouse as well. That would work. Go the Destiny route, give everyone aim assist. Just, restrict the rotational aim assist to controllers. They could do that too. I don't know what they'll do. But to me, this sounds like they're trying to look into curbing the higher-tier keyboard and mouse players, not that they're nerfing aim assist. So